All right. Well, welcome to another Wednesday night Bible study. I will open us with prayer and then we'll get into the study. Dear Lord, we thank you that you are sovereign. We thank you that you are in control even when things seem out of control. We thank you that you knew the end from the beginning and that you have this all planned out. Yes, you'd help us to understand our times, understand what to look for so that we can anticipate your second coming and the rapture. And we ask, oh Lord, that you would enlighten your word to our hearts, help us to understand what you purpose, then help us to share that with others. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Well, let's get started. So, anybody have any questions from last week? Last week we went over Noah, Lot, and all of that. If you do, you can always message me later. So we will get started then. We're gonna cover Ezekiel 38. So Ezekiel 38 is, remember, we already covered Ezekiel 36 and 37. That talks about is the dry belly of dry bones and Israel coming back into the land and Israel becoming prosperous again and all of that. So that we already covered in a previous Bible study. This is Ezekiel 38 and 39 are prophecies that have yet to occur. Now, there's some differences of opinion as to whether Ezekiel 38 is connected to the Battle of Armageddon at the end of the tribulation period. In my looking at it, I don't necessarily see that they're the same. It does reference Gog and Magog, but it doesn't reference anything else. So everything else in that battle, the entire world comes against Israel. In this battle, there are some that stay out of it. So to me, it appears to be two separate things. You have a question?
Yeah, I forget the sequence. Are we still going to be here? Or are we going to be raptured first?
Before this occurs?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's what I was just talking about. So if you believe that this is referring to the same thing as at the end of the tribulation, my opinion is, if that's the case, then we'll be out of here first. However, I don't think that the war at the end of the tribulation period is the same as this war. I think this is a separate war, which case I think that this will happen either, I don't know whether we'll be raptured before or after, but this war will happen, in my opinion, before the 7 years of tribulation. Because throughout the 7 years of tribulation, there's as we go through here, you'll see there are some things that don't line up for it to be at that point. Because at that point, Israel is definitely under attack. Israel is attacked by all the nations in the entire world, and that's not what this is talking about.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so this is something that has not yet happened, but needs to take place, in my opinion, before the tribulation period.
Okay.
Okay. Now, whether, like I said, we don't know exactly when the rapture will happen in regards to that 7-year tribulation period. So this could come before the rapture. It could come immediately after the rapture. It could come But in my opinion, it comes before the 7 years starts. So I think it's important to understand. And we can see, as we go through, you'll see it's being set up. The all these different nations and whatnot, they're already starting to form in the connections that they need to in order for this to happen. So we're gonna show that. So Ezekiel 38 starts out and says, "Son of man, turn your face against Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal, and say, this is what the Lord God says. Look, I'm against you, Gog, chief prince of Meshach and Tubal. I will turn you around and put hooks in your jaws and will bring you out with all your army. Persia, Cush, and Put are with them. Gomer and all its troops, and Beth Togarmah from the furthest, remotest parts of the north, along with all its troops. Many peoples are with you. In the last years, you will enter a land that has been restored from war." And this is talking again to Israel. "In the last years, you will enter a land that has been restored from war and gathered from many peoples to the mountains of Israel, which had long been ruined. They were brought out of many peoples, and all of them now live securely. You and all your troops and many peoples with you will advance. Coming like thunderstorms, you will be like a cloud covering the land." So there's two parts here. The first part's talking about a group of nations that are going to come against Israel in a war. And the second part is talking about how Israel is now back in the mountains of Israel after they had, been restored after a war, which that part we already know about, right? Israel, after World War I and World War II, were restored back to as a nation.
Right, that is
And the
already
Jews were
happened.
brought back, right? So that part has happened. But, and we'll see that, to the mountains of Israel. It doesn't just say to the land of Israel, it says to the mountains of Israel. That's important. And we'll get back to that point here in a little bit. Okay? So they were brought out from the many peoples, and all of them now live securely. You and all your troops, many peoples with you, will advance like a thunderstorm, and you will be like a cloud covering the land. So we're going to cover some of this because some of it is done, like they're now in their land, but parts of it are still not done, right? The mountains of Israel is important. The living securely is important. And so let's move forward and we'll start looking at some of these pieces. Obviously, the first part that we want to look at is this Gog thing, right? There's Gog of Magog, right? So Gog, just basically, they're not sure exactly what it is. It could be a mountain. It could be a name. Okay, so Gog is an unknown at this point. We're not exactly sure what Gog of Magog is. Okay. And here's where I talk about, I show you, that's the reference I mentioned where Gog and Magog are mentioned in Revelation 20. So even though there's this war before the tribulation, there's still Gog and Magog, right? And so Satan will be released from his prison, go out to deceive the nations at the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them for battle. So they'll still be around, whoever this group is of Gog and Magog. And the other key thing here is that when it says in the previous thing here, chief prince of Meshach and Tubal, chief prince can be a worldly prince, but that word can also be a spirit, a demon. Because remember in Daniel, it said the prince of the kingdom of Persia opposed Michael for 21 days. Well, obviously, I don't think an earthly king is going to oppose the archangel of God. It's obviously another angel that's opposing Michael. And so
Where was that, Daniel?
Daniel 10:13. And it also 10, 20, and 21. Where it says, do you know why I've come to you? I must return at once to fight against the prince of Persia. When I leave, the prince of Egypt will come. No one has the courage to support me except Michael, your prince. So Gabriel came to Daniel, give him a message, but he needed help from Michael to overcome these demons. But now let's look at, so just given that, we don't know what God is. Prince could be a earthly prince, or could be a spiritual prince, or could be one influencing the other, right? But let's look at the other ones, because some of the other ones are known, and we can identify where these are. So in that list, we'll go up to the list again. So we have Meshach, Tubal, Gomer. So let's look at Meshach, Tubal, and Gomer. So Gomer, Tubal, Meshach, and Magog were all sons of Japheth, one of Noah's sons. And so, according to Jewish tradition, we have an idea of where the sons of Japheth went to settle. So remember, Jesus said, as in the times of Noah, right? So we're talking about Noah's sons, which would have been in the times of Noah. So knowing where the Noah's sons went will give us a clue as to who these nations would be today, right? So if you look on the map, you can probably see it a little better over here. You can see Gomer is in Turkey. Hogama is in Turkey. Gomer also, though, left and went and spread up into Eastern Europe. Magog went up into Russia. And Tubal is also in Turkey. And Togarmah is in Turkey. So Togarmah is the son of Gomer. But so Togarmah and Meshach and Tubal are all clearly in Turkey. Gomer was in Turkey and then spread up into Eastern Europe. And then Magog went up towards Russia. Right? So that takes care of Magog, the land of Magog. So if we say Magog went up into Russia, then it seems logical that Magog would reference Russia.
Right.
Right? And then we have Meshach and Tubal, which are clearly Turkey, and
Right.
Gomer. And
Magog references Russia.
Yep, I have another slide to show you.
Oh.
So Meshach, Tubal, and Beth Togarmah, those are clearly Turkey. Gomer, probably Eastern Europe, but could also just be Turkey. It depends on what time frame we're talking about, because he started in Turkey and then went up farther north. All right, so then that leaves Persia, Cush, and Put. So then Cush and Put are sons of Ham. And Persia has always been Persia. Only now, in our modern day, we call Persia Iran.
Okay.
So Persia, everyone agrees on Persia, because Persia has always been Persia. It's only recently that they changed their name to Iran. And most people agree on Cush and Put. And the sons of Ham went into Africa. So Cush is probably Ethiopia, Sudan area, and then Put is Libya. And most people agree on that. The only disagreements there are is about Magog.
Wait a minute.
I'm going to get a slide that puts
Oh.
it all in one piece.
All right.
So most people agree on putting Libya area, whether it be Algeria, Libya, that general vicinity. Kush is Ethiopia, Sudan, this general vicinity down there. Those are clear. Persia is 100%. Everyone agrees on Persia. The only ones that are, and most people, most scholars that I've seen agree that Togarmah and Tubal and Neshet are all right there in Turkey. Gomer and Magog are some people they just say, oh, it's all just Turkey. But if you look at the wording up here, it says from the remotest parts of the north. So I wouldn't say Turkey is the remotest parts of the north. Now, maybe in the Bible time, you might say, well, nobody went farther north than that. Okay, that might be true, but I think God is precise enough that if he just meant north of Israel, he would have said north of Israel, as opposed to the remotest parts of the north, which would be the remote parts of the north is Russia, for sure, in my mind. But I could be wrong. So that's sort of what we're looking at here. And here I break it down for you. So you have Gog basically meaning a leader of some kind. We're not exactly sure what that word necessarily means. But most people, the ones I put in bold, most people agree on.
Yeah.
Okay. So Persia, Iran, yes. Kush, Sudan and Ethiopia, yes. Put, Libya, Algeria, yes. Beth Togarmah, Turkey, yep, everyone agrees on that. The only disagreements is Magog, which is Russia, the farthest north, and Gomer, whether that includes Europe or not. So, but we're sure about the other parts. So let's look at where things are happening right now. Right. We know that Israel is certainly surrounded by enemies. But what about this alliance? What about Russia and Ethiopia and Sudan and Iran and Turkey and Libya? Are they starting to coalesce together? Are they? And the answer is 100% yes. Although Russia and Turkey really don't like each other very much, they are definitely cooperating.
Yeah.
And working together in many, many ways.
Uh-huh.
Turkey and Russia are both in Libya. Turkey and Russia are both in Ethiopia, Sudan area. Iran is in Ethiopia and Sudan. Iran is trying to influence in Libya. Iran is in Syria. So think about Syria. Who's in Syria? Russia's in Syria, Turkey's in Syria, Iran's in Syria. They're all in Syria. And so these alliances and military cooperations are being set up. They're aligning together right now and have been for the past few years. This is not new. After Erdogan took over Turkey, he turned away from the Western way and started working with all these other sides. So this is certainly being set up. All right, so so all those alliances for that battle are being coordinated right now. Now let's look at the next section of Ezekiel 38. All right, so it says, in the last years you'll enter a land that has been restored from war. We agree that's already happened. And we gathered from many peoples to the mountains of Israel, which had been a ruin. They were brought out from peoples, and all of them now live securely. All right, so when Israel became a nation, Israel did not get any of the mountains of Israel. They had all the flatlands.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a map. So you can see where all the flat parts are, all the green there. That's what was the nation of Israel. So all their enemies were up on the mountains. So they could shoot down from Golan Heights in Israel. They could shoot down from what they called the West Bank in the mountains at Israel. They could shoot down from Lebanon into Israel. They had none on the mountains at all. Now, what has happened recently? Well, Israel has taken the mountains in southern Lebanon. So they have some of the mountains there. Israel has taken the Golan Heights. They had Golan Heights, but they took more of the Golan Heights. They took the Golan Heights in one of their earlier wars. But now they have even more of the Golan Heights. They can actually look down into Syria from the Golan Heights.
Oh.
Now, the other parts are the West Bank, or what they call the West Bank, which is actually Judea and Samaria. So Jerusalem is there in the middle, and so south of Jerusalem would be Judea, and north of Jerusalem would be Samaria. And that's what they call the West Bank, but it's actually Judea and Samaria. But that is controlled by the Palestinian Authority, parts of it. But that also, Israel is starting to take back. They're moving their armies into the mountains of Israel in the West Bank. And you can see that's an even better picture down there, where you can see in the lower right, or you can see the outline of what was the nation of Israel. They had very little of the mountains. But they're starting to take them back. And they're starting to say that they're theirs. Not only are they taking it back, they're saying we're not giving them back. We're not going to leave the Golan Heights in the mountains there. We're not going to, so this is historic. Israel is taking back their mountains. And in order to set up this part where it talks about, you will say, I will go up against the land of open villages. I will come against a tranquil people who are living securely, all of them living without walls and bars, without bars and gates. So what's happening? So they currently have peace with Jordan, which is east of Jerusalem and Israel. They have peace with Egypt, which is south. They didn't have peace up north. They didn't have peace with Lebanon, and they didn't have peace with Syria. They now have a ceasefire with Lebanon, and they're in talks with Lebanon to have a permanent ceasefire. and establish positive relationships. Now, if Syria is falling apart, but Israel is, like I said, into part of Syria and controlling part of Syria. So they are establishing an area which in the next year or 2 or 3, they might actually be living in peace with their neighbors, especially if something can happen in Syria. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But so we're getting to the point where they will be living securely and they won't need walls or bars, especially if they can take back the West Bank and get rid of all the because right now in Israel you have a wall with Gaza, but Gaza is about to be, reclaimed. There used to be walls up in Golan Heights, but there aren't anymore because now they control that area. The only walls that are left are the walls in the mountains where the Palestinian Authority and the West Bank is.
Yeah.
And right now they're starting to take and put military troops in there to try to get rid of the terrorists that are there. And if they're able to do that, then they'll be able to take down the walls and live securely without walls. And up to this point, what has kept that is Iran. Iran has been funding all the terrorism. And then some of the other Arab nations, which have also been supporting the terrorists. But if that funding is cut off by agreements with Israel being pushed by the United States, they may have peace. And unfortunately, what that means is the peace will lead to a war. Right? But that's what this is about, is that they're going to have peace first, and then there'll be the Ezekiel 38 war. But you can see, the people who are going to be at war at them are not right on their borders. They're out here. They're one step removed. Turkey is beyond Lebanon and Syria. Right? Iran is beyond Jordan and Iraq. Libya is beyond Egypt. And Ethiopia is beyond Saudi Arabia. So they're going to be, according to this, they're going to be surrounded by friends here in the near future. So what is the reason for this war? So according to Ezekiel 38:12, the reason for this war, and there's some people who say, oh, this war took place back, in 67 or 73 or whatever. But the reason for those wars were to annihilate the state of Israel, right? Ezekiel says that this war is going to be in order to seize, spoil, and carry off plunder. That's not what the wars, or the earlier Israeli wars were about. So it couldn't have been those. It had to be after Israel became back in their land, right? But it couldn't have been the earlier wars because they had a different purpose. This purpose is in order to seize, spoil, and carry off plunder, right? So what possibly could Israel have that will cause these nations to want to invade them? What? That's just Ezekiel 38:12.
I think it was the one before that I wanted.
That one?
That one there. Okay.
So why would anyone want to invade Israel? Well, Israel is number 2 in the entire world for research and development. And over here on the right, you can see all the things that Israel has invented. So they invented a swallowable medical camera. They invented world's first USB drive. They invented a drinking water that can be produced from thin air, right? They invented the bio bee, harmless pest control. So all these things Israel invented. Yep. Israel is a very highly developed country compared to everyone else in that region, which are way down at the bottom, except for the real oil-rich countries. But most of the other countries in that area are way down at the bottom. And Israel also is very important to the diamond industry. So those are some of the things that might entice somebody to want to take over the state of Israel.
Right, the diamond industry isn't just for diamonds for wearing.
Right.
They use diamond dust for a lot of stuff.
They do. There's a lot of industrial uses for diamonds.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Another one, especially in the Middle East, is very important, is water. And Israel used to be a desert, but they have become the world's leader in water reclamation, in that 87% of all wastewater undergoes purification and reuse. They also are top of the line with their desalinization plants. And as mentioned, they've created innovations that suck water out of the air. Right. So why is that important? Well, they are surrounded by nations that have deserts. The water is critical, obviously, to life. And so if you know anything about the region, right, you have Egypt and you have the Nile, which is the lifeblood of Egypt, right? The Nile is everything. If you look on a map in Egypt, everything is along the Nile. Nothing is in the rest of the country. It's all along the Nile. But upstream, they're in the country which is to the south of them, they're building a dam to dam up the Nile. So the Nile is starting to shrink because of the dam they built upstream. And the same thing is happening with the Tigris and Euphrates, because Syria and Turkey have dammed up those. And so that's taking and making the Euphrates and the Tigris shrink in water. And obviously Iraq needs both of those in order to survive. So it's becoming a huge, huge problem in the Middle East. It's water. And Israel has water and knows how to take care of it and create it, pull it from the Mediterranean Sea, pull it from the air, and reuse all their things. Now, the other thing that's very interesting is that up until recently, up until the last, I think, 10, 15 years, Israel had no oil or gas. But they recently found oil and gas in the Mediterranean off their coast. And they're developing it, and they're getting ready to, or they're starting to send this gas out. So they're talking about doing a pipeline from Israel over to Europe, which would, where does Russia get most of its money? Oil and gas. Where does Iran get most of its money? Yeah, right. Exactly. So Israel is starting to be a competitor to all those countries. And Turkey doesn't have any, and they think that that the oil and the gas that Israel is developing is theirs. Because it's in the Mediterranean Sea. This is Turkey up here, this is Israel over here, and it's right in here. So Turkey says, no, 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 that's ours. Even though it's not really theirs, but this is international intrigue.
Right.
So this is another reason for spoils that those nations particularly might come against Israel. All right. Now there's another section of Ezekiel 38, Ezekiel 38:13. It says, Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish with all its rulers will ask you, have you come to see spoiled? In other words, what that means to me is they are not part of the war. They're just saying, why are you coming down and trying to attack Israel? They're sort of like saying, hey, what are you doing? They're not part of the war, but they're questioning those who are attacking Israel. So who is Sheba and Dedan? Sheba and Dedan is Saudi Arabia. So up until the last few years, Saudi Arabia hated Israel and would have been on the side of helping anybody who was hurting Israel. But recently, they're almost to the point where they're going to have a treaty with Israel.
Oh, wow.
Right. So never before in history has Saudi Arabia been on the side of Israel, but they're about to be. Right? So Sheba and Dedan are about to be friends with Israel. Another setup for Ezekiel 38. So then the next question is, who are the merchants of Tarshish? And that's another one of those things that we're not sure. There's speculation that the merchants of Tarshish are like from Spain. So Tarshish might be the southern part of Spain. But the merchants of Tarshish, because it didn't just say Tarshish, it says the merchants of Tarshish, and then who would the merchants of Tarshish be? So that's a big question, because we're not sure, because some of those people who were in that region went up to the UK. Some of those people that were in that region went over to the United States. 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, right? So there have been speculations that the merchants of Tarshish are talking about Western Europe and the United States, but we don't really know. It is not clear. Okay, we don't know what that is referring to. Could be, and given the current climate, it would make sense that Western Europe and the United States would say, "Hey, what are you doing?" Now, under Trump, I think we do more than say, "Hey, what are you doing?" So it's probably not going to happen right now, but you can see it being set up, right? You can see in the next couple of years, we will probably have an agreement between Sheba and Dedan and Israel. And so they would then not be part of this attack, according to Ezekiel 38. So you can see it being set up. Yeah. Okay. So we're talking about Russia, we're talking about Iran, we're talking about Turkey. As I said, they're all in Syria. But what about Syria? Syria is not mentioned in Ezekiel 38 at all. We don't know. So we know Syria is not mentioned, Lebanon's not mentioned, Jordan's not mentioned, Egypt's not mentioned. Those are all the countries that have always attacked Israel. But they're not mentioned. Now we know that Egypt and Jordan have an agreement, a peace agreement with Israel. So that explains that part. Lebanon, like I said, is probably about to have a peace agreement with Israel. But what about Syria? I don't, in the current climate especially, we know that Syria will not have a peace agreement with Israel. The people who are in charge right now are Sunni fanatics, and they want Israel dead. Just like they want the Christians dead and they want the Shiites dead. They want everybody dead right now. So what about Syria? Well, there is another prophecy out there that talks about Syria that has not yet been fulfilled. Should we look at that one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Isaiah 17, 1-3 says, an oracle against Damascus. Look, Damascus, that's the capital of Syria, is no longer a city. It has become a ruined heap. The cities of Ararar are forsaken. They will be places for flocks. They will lie down without fear. The fortress disappears from Ephraim and a kingdom from Damascus. The remnant of Aram will be like the splendor of the Israelites. This is a declaration of the Lord of hosts. So, Damascus is considered to be one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. So we know that this has not been fulfilled. Damascus is no longer a city. So at some point, I don't know whether it's before Ezekiel 38, after Ezekiel 38, I don't know. It would make sense to be before, since Syria isn't mentioned at all in this war, but we don't know. But at some point, God promises Damascus will no longer be a city. It will be utterly destroyed. And the other cities mentioned there are located on east of the Dead Sea, just north of Arnon River, which is the parts of Jordan. And that part really isn't that inhabited right now anyway, so I don't know. Right now, they sort of are a place for flocks. But number one, definitely is verse 1 has not been fulfilled for sure. And then the fortress disappears from Ephraim, a kingdom from Damascus. So it looks like Syria will no longer be a nation. It'll break apart. And right now, it looks like it is breaking apart. The remnant of Aram is the southern part of Syria. The remnant of Aram will be like the splendor of the Israelites. Now, I don't know what that means. Does that mean that it's destroyed, or does that mean that it becomes Israeli?
A remnant of Aram, a remnant of them
Yes.
will be the splendor
Like,
of Israel.
They'll be like the splendor of the Israelites. Right. And you can read it both ways. You can read it either that the remnant of Aram will be like the splendor of Israelites, and the splendor of Israelites have been destroyed in the past, and so there will be no more. Or the remnant of Aram will be like the splendor of Israelites, meaning current. They will be, the remnant that is in that area will be a splendor of the Israelites, because the Israelites will be there. I'm not sure which way that's going to go. But it obviously refers to that area of Syria. Verse 1, though, is very clear. That will happen, and that has not yet happened. Damascus will be destroyed. How? I don't know. But at some point, it will be, which is why it probably is not mentioned in Ezekiel 38:4. Yes. So, there are a couple of other scriptures talking about the last days that we probably should just be aware of and watch out for. Jeremiah 38 and Jeremiah 48, I should say, and Jeremiah 49. Jeremiah 48:47 says, yet I will restore the fortunes of Moab in the last days. This is the Lord's declaration. So Moab is on that eastern shore of the Dead Sea, which is currently Jordan. So at some point, God promises to restore the fortunes of Moab, which Jordan. So Jordan currently, if they're currently at peace with Israel, and if they continue to be positive towards Israel, God will bless them. This is promised in this scripture. And then in the last days, I will restore the portions of Elam. And this is the Lord's declaration. So Elam is on the eastern part of Iran and partly into Iraq. Now, I don't know what that means either, restore the fortunes of Elam, but if you look at Iran certainly has a whole lot of money, right? So fortune to me would be money. So Iran has lots of money. So God did restore the fortunes of Elam. Question is, will they remain that way? And maybe this will take place after the Ezekiel 38 war, when God destroys them, but then restores Iran, because right now, the people that are running Iran are Shiite extremists, but the majority of the people in Iran hate that, and they don't want that. So if this Ezekiel 38 war, this is my pure conjecture, putting that out there, but if in the Ezekiel 38 war, if that happens, and then the government of Iran is taken out because God miraculously saves Israel, then the people in Iran, which is Persia, can rise, or ancient Elam can rise and once again be a friend to Israel. Because the people in the people in Persia, Iran, the majority of them don't hate Israel, but they're under the thumb of a regime that absolutely hates Israel and the U.S. So those are two more to be looking at for that area that are related. All right, so there's another one that's also related, I think, Zephaniah chapter 2, verse 5-7. Woe, inhabitants of the sea coast, the nation of the Cherethites. The word of the Lord is against you, Canaan, the land of Philistines. I will destroy you until there is no one left. The seacoast will become pasture lands with caves for shepherds and folds for sheep. Coastland will belong to the remnant of the house of Judah. They will find pasture there, and they will lie down in the evening in the houses of Ashkelon. For the Lord their God will return to them and restore their fortunes. So that's talking about Gaza. So Gaza will be destroyed until there's no one left. And what is Trump talking about? Trump is talking about taking the people out of Gaza because the land is destroyed. And what does it say? I will destroy you until there is no one left.
Wow.
And I think that's pretty amazing. So yes, that's talking about the Gaza area, because that's where the Philistines lived. All right. So that was the study for tonight.
A lot to take in. I'm gonna rewatch it.
Yes, yes. So that
You're
is
gonna have to rewatch it. That's a lot to take in all at once.
that's a lot. Yeah,
Especially when you're not familiar with geography at all and history. That's
yes. So we need to pray for the Middle East for sure, because there's a lot going on there right now. There are Christians being slaughtered in Syria, and also Alawite Muslims being slaughtered in Syria. Last I heard, is anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000 depending on which estimate you look at. But that's probably, the 1,000 is probably on the low side because they were like throwing bodies off cliffs and burying them in huge pits and things, trying to cover up the numbers. Yeah. So that's very sad. So continue to pray for that region. If you go next week, we will look at 1 Timothy 4 and 2 Timothy 3. So that is what you can do to prepare for next week. And if you have any prayer requests, feel free to send them my way. Otherwise, I will close out the study for now. And we will see you again next week. We will do some praying here in our area here before we close out, but I'm going to stop the recording.